Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are joining. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to discuss this important topic with us. We will give everybody about 20 seconds and then we will get started. Thank you. All right. So today's topic is modernizing nonprofit finance beyond the status quo. It really takes a fresh view on what is happening to finance in the not-for-profit sector and what may be possible for your organization. I do want to first thank the Ontario Nonprofit Network for helping us to get the word out on this session today. So I recognize that many of you have come in through that network. Thank you very much for being here. Let's get started. All right. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Omar Vizram. I am the founder of Enkel. I started Enkel back in 2016. I'm joined today by Rebecca Harrison. Rebecca has been our client for a number of years at Wellspring as well as at another organization. Rebecca is, I would say, a different type of executive director. She really brings, she challenges the status quo in all aspects of how she runs her operations, and she will be able to provide a really unique lens on this important topic today. Thank you for joining us, Rebecca. All right. In terms of agenda for today, what we will cover is, first of all, why the status quo financial model is failing nonprofits, helping you understand fundamental shifts in the nonprofit landscape that make traditional approaches to finance inadequate. We will cover what we call the three pillars of modern finance, which are visibility, timeliness, and governance. And we'll give you some practical takeaways on how you might look at transforming your organization. We will talk about leveraging technology and expertise to transform your finance function, followed by practical steps to get started. And then we will get into a Q&A session. So please do feel free to ask us questions in the chat function throughout the session, and we will get to them at the end of the session. All right. A little bit about Enkel. As I mentioned, I co-founded Enkel in 2016, really with a simple problem in mind. And that problem is that you can't build a great organization without good books. Our organization has evolved, grown. We do offer more than just bookkeeping today, but really this core statement is really at the heart of everything that we do. Today, we have 300 clients from coast to coast, and we serve 100 not-for-profits across the country. We really think of our business today as having two distinct functions. One is financial operations, which is bookkeeping, payroll, all of the processing that happens throughout the year. And then the second is financial management support, so CFO advisory and controllership services. I would like to acknowledge that our head office, where I'm located today, is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. All right. Now, before we get too far into things, I want to start with a question. What is your top concern in your organization's finance function today? Is it one, staff knowledge, two, outdated technology, three, poor board reporting and or poor funder reporting, four, finance cost, cash flow visibility, budgeting and forecasting process, or five, compliance risk, bad audits, risk to charitable status, etc. Let's see what you have to say. All right. So let's see what we have here. Interesting. I'm not sure I've ever seen a poll that looks like this, but staff knowledge had zero respondents. Outdated technology was 15%. Poor board reporting or poor funder reporting also had zero. 85% of you said finance cost, cash flow visibility, budgeting, and forecasting. So that is really a clear winner in this case. So thank you for sharing that. That is very insightful. All right. This first section is called the breaking point and why the status quo fails. Let's really talk about, before we dive too deep, what do we mean by the traditional finance function versus the modern finance function? Let's get clear on that. So, the traditional finance function really looks a little bit like this. Transactions are recorded, ledgers are maintained, bookkeeping and accounting is really designed to produce compliance reports for regulators and auditors when they need them, which is significantly after the transactions have occurred. Managing payroll and accounts payable is often paper-based, which we would call old-fashioned in this case. And finance is reactive. It reacts to financial problems after they happen. It is viewed as a cost center and ultimately an administrative burden. On the other side here, we have what we call the modern finance function. This is a finance function that drives strategic value and mission impact. It is really a partner for the rest of the organization to drive the mission and impact of the organization forward. For one, the finance function is responsible for strategic decision making through real-time insights and analytics. The finance function is also, in this case, responsible for organizational resilience through forecasting and scenario planning. So instead of looking back, it looks forward. The finance function should provide stakeholder confidence through transparent and accessible reporting. And it should help to connect financial data to program outcomes, positively impacting organizational mission. So primary shift is going from reactive mode to proactive mode, partnership mode with the rest of the organization. So why is the status quo finance approach failing nonprofits? And the reason that we are even doing this webinar is we see this. We see this across the sector where the finance function operates like it did in 1995. We need to change that. So why is it failing nonprofits today? Well, nonprofits face increasing accountability demands from funders, boards, and regulators. Yes, most are operating with outdated financial systems and workflow. The end result is ultimately more time and energy spent as demands increase. Just one key thing that I see when we talk to potential clients is many organizations today are using outdated desktop software. Cloud-based software, and we have a lot of content on our website on this, and many of you have probably heard me talk about this before, but cloud-based software provides immediate efficiency and efficiency gains and also protects your organization's data. So that's just one clear sign that I see that many organizations are not operating, not optimizing their finance function today. So what are the challenges? Well, complex funding environment, volatile, diversified revenue streams, and growing regulatory requirements. Secondly, increased transparency demands. So donors and funders expect visibility, detailed impact reporting, and clear connections between funding and outcomes. And finally, there are strategic gaps and financial strain. So without modern finance capabilities, without using some of the great technology that's available, nonprofits face delayed decision-making, blind spots in financial management, which of course has implications in terms of decision-making, and really inhibits the organization's ability to move forward. Rebecca, let's chat a little bit. Help me understand, what does status quo finance look like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to speak to this again from as an executive director from an operations perspective. Where does status quo create friction within operations? And the way that I want to tackle this question really is by focusing kind of on three main stakeholder groups: your board, your staff and your team, and your stakeholders. So when you're stuck in status quo finance with your board, what I always say this looks like is it looks like more questions than answers from your board. So, for example, how did this fundraising campaign or event perform this year compared to last year? I don't know. Can we afford to make this change at this organization? Maybe you want to move into a different office. Maybe you want to hire a different role. Well, can we afford that? I'm not sure. This major thing is changing. Are we still going to be able to make payroll in 4 months' time? I don't know. These are all examples of a board not having access to timely, transparent financial information at their fingertips when they need it. What I often find in working with boards is when this is the case, there's low trust from the board in leadership and in operations. So you might have lines being blurred between board and operations. You might have high board turnover, even. Board members really want to contribute, but they really want to feel like they're on a stable ship contributing. So, questions around finance and viability can be really challenging for board members to manage. Um, and then when you think about your team, in terms of what does status quo finance look like, as Omar was referencing, in this day and age, it seems as though change is happening so quickly, scrutiny is high, need is high. As organizations, we're having to be even more responsive. Don't we all hate the word pivot from the pandemic era? But realistically, we are expected to pivot a lot. And your staff and your teams, even if they don't know, even if they haven't been told outright, if there are challenges with finance, with being able to afford programs, with cash flow, your team will feel it. And when you have a modern finance function, you have the tools at your fingertips to really be able to support your team to become a part of financial planning, to become a part of how money is spent within your organization or how resources are allocated. And so, in terms of, again, what does status quo look like with your teams? It can look like high stress and anxiety from your teams if pivots are coming down the pipeline for financial reasons that you couldn't see in advance. Again, it might look like high turnover for your staff. So, that's really a couple examples of what status quo finance looks like for staff. And then thirdly, of course, is stakeholders. So donors, funders, even the public through the CRA and our audits. What status quo finance looks like is, say, every time you have to do a grant report, problems, audit, challenging, long, missing information. You might see funders not returning. You might see donors not returning. You might see letters from the CRA saying, "Where's your audit? Where's your T3010?" Things like that. There's no quicker way to lose trust in a funder than by not having financial, accurate, informative data at your fingertips. And so, yeah, those I would say are the three. When we look at how does status quo finance appear in operations and practice, those are some of the sort of indicators that I've seen across board, staff, and stakeholders.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Rebecca. In particular, what stood out for me from what you just said is the engagement and collaboration piece, right? Who would have thought that, running finance in a traditional way can have such broad implications? So thank you for sharing that. Very insightful. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper. What we call the new norm for executive directors. And Rebecca, we chatted about this in the past, but it does seem that today organizations, boards are really demanding greater finance capabilities from executive directors. It's not just about fundraising skills anymore. So let's
Yeah.
talk about why this shift is happening. Well, getting money just isn't enough. Bringing in revenue, of course, is critical, but if you don't know what's happening to it or can't manage cash flow, you're flying blind. Secondly, finance um, equals organizational viability, really. So boards recognize that strong finance capabilities are, of course, essential to understanding organizational health and making strategic decisions, really in line with a number of the things that you just said, Rebecca. Third, critical executive director competency. Well, finance literacy is now seen as a core leadership skill, not just a nice to have or something to delegate entirely. And I think it comes back to that trust piece, right? If a board is entrusting an executive director with its funds, it wants to know that the executive director can, sustain the organization. And finally, sector-wide uncertainty. With more nonprofits facing deficits and closures, boards want leaders who can navigate financial challenges proactively. So, of course, when the times are tough, scrutiny on the numbers is even more close, and decision making that is based on the numbers becomes primary. So, all of this is really a natural evolution, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just flip back to the last
Yeah,
slide for a second?
please.
Yeah, for sure, Omar. Um, yeah, a couple of things just to add some color to this as well is I think that when we are talking about in the last slide around these realms where it's, again, like you said, Omar, it's a bit of a surprise to say, who would have thought that at the core of this, that finance, that a modern finance function has so much to do with this area, whereas historically it might not have. If we think about these realms of sort of board, so board confidence, and then staff and team culture, and then stakeholder confidence, think of it as like a Venn diagram. And at the center of all of these Venn diagrams is both the executive director and modern finance. And there may have been a time, like you say, Omar, there may have been a time in 1995 or even 10 years ago when it was easier to retain board members. People were more giving of their time. They were less consumed. I think we need to think in sort of a post-pandemic world here. It is harder to get volunteers. It's harder to get board members and keep them. You have to make sure that the board experience is insightful and sort of safe feeling in some
Yeah,
ways. When you think about team culture, same thing. People have a much lower tolerance for stress and anxiety in the workplace than they used to. People are demanding work-life balance as they should, and people are demanding positive work experiences as they
yeah,
should. Being able to manage and keep people feeling good about the viability of your organization, in part through finance, is now critical. Same with stakeholders. Need is higher, scrutiny is higher. I think that people, reporting expectations are getting higher and money is getting harder to come by because need is so high. Um, it's really when we talk about the new norm for executive directors, and I'll share a quick story from of my own experience. It is no longer, I think, reasonable for executive directors to expect that they will not be a part of financial leadership. I think the new norm and part of the modern finance function is that executive directors or CEOs or whatever the title or role may be must be a part of financial leadership because you may be the only one at your organization that has oversight over all of those three realms: board, stakeholders, team, and the only one that can do that translation and bridging work of finance for stakeholders, finance for team, and finance for board. So I just
yeah.
wanted to add
No,
that.
that's great. I love that visual for sure.
Yeah.
We'll
Oh,
have
and
to.
let me just share my quick quip here as well,
Yeah.
because I was like, again, so it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago now when I stepped into my first role as an executive director. And I told them out the gate, I said, my most shallow body of experience in leadership is in finance. They did not bat an eye. They did not have a problem with that. They were like, no problem. That's fine. You can learn on the fly. Don't worry about it. When I moved to Wellspring, this was last year, in the search for my next role, every single every single interview that I did, I was asked more questions about financial leadership and management than I was even about fundraising, which I think is really a reflection of how things have changed. It's now not enough to just be able to bring money into an organization because that doesn't mean that the money is sustainable or that the organization is viable. In order to be able to interpret sustainability when it comes to fundraising, you have to have modern finance in place right there. So just a quick story to bring life to that, how the new norm has changed.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. All right. So who owns finance in your organization? So I'm kind of thinking of this again in the context of your Venn diagram. Um, Clarity, of course, in who owns finance is an important question. So the executive director is ultimately accountable for finance. The executive director owns the outcome and is responsible for ensuring the finance function delivers what the organization needs, right at the center of that Venn diagram. Then, however, you have your finance function managed, so whether it's through an external party or internally, that person or that team is responsible for the actual work, the bookkeeping, reporting, analysis, and strategic finance support. And then on the other side, you have the board and the treasurer who are consulted. They provide governance, oversight, strategic input, and they ultimately hold the executive director accountable for the financial health of the organization. So, one clear message that I want you to leave with is the executive director owns it. The executive director owns finance, but shouldn't be the one doing it. All right. Let's dive into what we call the three pillars of modern finance. Um, oh, sorry. I went the wrong direction here. There we go. Three pillars that really transform the organization from reactive finance to strategic finance. Those three pillars are visibility, timeliness, and governance. Let's dive into visibility. Visibility means real-time access to accurate financial data for all stakeholders. What it might feel like is that everyone can see current financial information. The board can make informed decisions. Donors understand the impact of their funds, and management can identify trends and risks early. Timeliness, timely reporting, and rapid response to financial change, that is. It might look like fast financial reporting that really enables the leadership team to pivot strategies, address issues proactively, and seize opportunities before they pass. And then third, we have governance. So strong policies, controls, and oversight that build trust. What that might look like is clear financial policies and documented controls that protect against fraud, ensure compliance, and demonstrate fiduciary responsibility. So take these three pillars together, and what it results in is a finance function that drives resilience, accountability, and mission impact. All right, let's dive a little bit further into visibility here. Visibility or financial transparency. So what does it mean? Well, stakeholders can access accurate, up-to-date financial information whenever needed. No more waiting weeks for reports or making decisions based on outdated data. So why does this matter? Well, boards make informed governance decisions with current information. Donors see the impact of their contributions clearly and regularly, and management identifies trends and issues early before they become a crisis. So how do you get there? Well, you need to understand what reporting requirements you have. You need to integrate all reporting and avoid standalone sheets. So how can you get all of your reporting out of QuickBooks? How can you set up your accounting file so that it is delivering the information that you need? How can you use custom reporting within the accounting software? There is a lot more advanced capability coming into just basic software like QuickBooks. How can you leverage that to get what you need, perhaps to report to a funder? Maintaining structured budgeting and forecasting processes, of course, is critical. And how do you integrate that back into accounting? And then, where needed, using dashboarding to really provide stakeholders with insights and key metrics. All right, Rebecca, back to you. With the changes that you have made in finance, and now I've been able to partner with you on this twice, how have you seen visibility and transparency improve?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to sort of stick with the model of the answering how we answered the last questions in terms of sort of board, team, and finance, and seeing how these things evolve. Um, so as far as visibility and transparency with your board and finance goes, really the place where this shows up the most, of course, is in your financial reporting to your board. So hopefully, ideally, your board is seeing, if not your monthly financial statements, hopefully your quarterly financial statements or something in that realm. But what's interesting about working with the board is if you are not giving them the right reports with the right comparisons, again, it causes more questions than it does answers. So, for example, um, once you have visibility and transparency in finance, what that looks like for me is, for example, we're making the right comparisons. So we might have a profit, a profit and loss or a balance sheet that's comparing to the year before, or maybe the quarter before, depending on your business model. And this is what is really salient is that all of our businesses, our organizations function in a different way. And so you can help train your board to be searching for the right information in the reports that you give them when you know what they are and you're able to give them the same reports consistently. I know historically what I've seen is that sometimes a finance committee or a board, when you're not giving them the right transparency and visibility, they're asking for different reports all the time. They're asking for different, oh, well, how can I see this? Well, how can I see this? Well, how can I see that? What you can do with a modern finance function, really to improve visibility and transparency, is create the reports, consistent reporting, so that you're helping your board to discern between what is a signal and what is just noise. I'm sure that lots of folks in this room, for example, might be expecting to get a grant at this time, but then for whatever reason, the grant comes a month and a half or 2 months later. I'm sure we've all been there. And so when we look in financial reporting, if we have the right reports, we're able to express and demonstrate, oh, this is not a huge problem that we're $150,000 short. We can demonstrate that it's coming at this time or in this place. We know where it is. Um, and then for staff and teams, when we talk about transparency and visibility, I would say one of the areas, and we'll talk a little bit about more of this in the next question. I really am on a mission to normalize conversations about managing cash flow. I saw that 85% of you, this is your top concern. And I just think that the more that we talk about it, the more normalized it becomes instead of us all stressing out and losing sleep in our own silos, wondering about cash flow, worrying about cash flow. Um, Visibility and transparency, I feel like cash flow projections and cash flow statements are one of the most powerful ways that we can bring visibility and transparency to our teams and our management of our teams. There's such a different experience when you're working with a team to be able to say, we can run this program or we can do this project, but we can't start in February. We have to start in April instead. This low stress. Okay, we have a plan. We know what we're doing. If our teams have planned to run a program or do a project in February and then last minute it's like, oh, actually, we don't have enough money in the bank account to do that. We have to push it. This is a stressful experience. This is a signal that something is wrong, something to worry about. And so when we see transparent and visible practices in our finance, we can see this sort of improvement in the experience of delivering work on our teams. And then finally, again, looking at stakeholders. I don't know if anybody here has ever been on the receiving end of a Ontario Trillium Foundation audit. But when that happens, you want to have your finances in place. You want to have the data on hand. There's really no quicker way to damage funder trust than to not have the data in place that you need, to not have the reports that you need. And so what I have seen at organizations is seeing more repeat funders coming back, increased donations, smoother audits, when we've got everything happening in a visible way. Again, last thing that we want any of us is to be getting a notification from the CRA saying that our T3010 is late, or that we've submitted the wrong information. So this really all comes back to visibility and transparency. And yeah, I would say that's the ways that I've seen operations change and evolve when this improves.
That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. Pull time. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the timeliness of your financial reporting? 1, always behind. 2, usually delayed. 3, somewhat timely. 4, mostly current. And 5, always current. Let's see what you have to say. All right. We have 5% at always behind, 20% at usually delayed, 35% at somewhat timely, 25% mostly current, and 15% always current. So I'd say fairly evenly distributed here across the 5 different options. Thank you for sharing that. All right, carrying on here. Let's talk about timeliness, timely financial information, moving from month end to real time. What does this mean? Well, it means financial reports are delivered within weeks, not months, and on time for critical management and board meetings. Month end closes are completed within the next week, giving leadership current data when making time sensitive decisions. So, why does this matter? Well, organizations with timely financial information can pivot strategies quickly when circumstances change. Leadership teams can seize fleeting opportunities before they disappear, and problems are addressed proactively rather than discovered too late. So, how do you get there? Well, apply project planning to bookkeeping and the monthly close. Really think of your monthly cycle in finance as a project plan. What has to happen when? What do you need when? Who needs to give what when to who? All of those pieces need to be very clearly defined. I see Rebecca's eyes lighting up over that one.
It's
Take
always,
it to
it's oh so fun. I think it's so funny, these things where it's like often, again, when we look at status quo versus modern, people think of almost everybody except the finance person. People are like, oh, that's a finance thing. Finance has nothing to do with me. And more now, it's like, no, almost so many people at an organization touch finance. And so I think that's just a great point of needing to
yeah.
apply project management because it's going to pass for good, modern, informative reporting. So many people are involved. It's a great point, Omar.
Great. Take into account, of course, key meetings and compliance deadlines. When is your board meeting? Don't plan on having the statements done the morning of. Have them done 3 or 4 days before, or 5 days before, so you can send them out. Keep a calendar of all key compliance dates. Get advanced buy-in from finance and use cloud-based technology. One thing I would strongly suggest is even consider using something like Asana, project management software, to really keep everybody accountable and clear on what they've committed to. All right. So, how has access to timely financial reporting reduced risk at the organizations that you have led, Rebecca?
And this is the point where I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive in on cash flow because I think, again, for so many executive directors and for so many organizations right now, this is top of mind. It's what we all want to know. Am I going to have enough money to do the things that we plan to do this year? And being able to create cash flow projections requires very timely information. So, from the way that we build our organizational budgets at both of the organizations that I've worked at, in order to be able to create cash flow projections, we've gone from creating an annual budget that is just like one lump sum, one column, to monthly. How much are we spending and earning in January, February, March, April, May, for example, to start with? This then means that every month we're looking at budget versus actuals and a profit and loss. What did we think we were going to spend? What did we actually spend? What did we think we were going to generate in revenue? What did we actually generate? And having that budget alongside timely monthly reporting, those two pieces come together for you to be able to create a cash flow projection. And when you have cash flow, when you're able to see it, cash flow just becomes something that you manage as opposed to it being a crisis. And timeliness is the difference between managing cash flow and experiencing a cash flow crisis. And I want to say, again, since the pandemic, every organization that I've worked at has had to manage cash flow. So I want to normalize that. As well, there are so many organizations that I've known, executive directors that I've known at different organizations who have actually had to close their doors because they were not able to see that their model was not sustainable soon enough. They were not able to identify the cash flow crisis soon enough to be able to pivot and chart a course through it. Um, so I really, really think that in terms of how does timely financial reporting reduce risk, if there are folks in the room who are thinking we need to change what's happening in finance so that we can manage cash flow better, this is the way that this happens. So reducing risk through the ability to see, forecast, and manage cash flow comes from timely financial reporting and practices.
Great. Thank you for that, Rebecca. All right. Interactive poll time. On a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you in your organization's financial governance and controls? 1, low confidence. 2, some concerns. 3, moderate confidence. 4, strong confidence. And 5, full confidence. Let's see what you have to say. Okay. Oh, we have an answer with 0. So nobody said low confidence. We have about 33% of you at some concerns, 40% at moderate concerns, 13% at strong confidence, and 13% at full confidence. Thank you for your responses. All right, let's talk about the third pillar. The third pillar of modern finance, governance, which is strong financial policies and controls. And they're policies and controls that protect your organization. What does all of this mean? Well, clear financial policies are documented and board approved. Controls are in place to prevent fraud and errors. And oversight mechanisms ensure that guidelines are consistently followed and that roles and responsibilities are clearly defined and understood. So why does this matter? Well, strong governance protects against fraud, embezzlement, and financial mismanagement. Also, compliance with regulations and funder requirements is ensured. Board members can fulfill their fiduciary duties with confidence. Tying back to what Rebecca said earlier, board members want to have confidence in the ship that they're on. And finally, stakeholders trust that funds are managed responsibly, tying back to that previous bullet point. So how do you get there? Well, document and update key financial policies and controls. Ensure that there are clear approval workflows and segregation of duties. Rely on technology to enforce controls. There's great technology that actually helps you ensure the segregation of duties. Ensure books are audit ready before audit begins. Yes, you absolutely want to have your numbers closed within 30 days. Your year-end numbers should be closed within 30 days of year-end. Accrual-based, all of the documents prepared and ready to go to your auditors. Implement and consider auditor control recommendations. So once the audit is complete, look at those recommendations that the auditors make and see how you can incorporate them back into the organization for improved governance. Rebecca, Tell us how controls and financial policies help to protect the organization and its stakeholders.
Yeah, so one of the ones that I want to focus on in terms of protecting the organization is in how governance and policies protect during succession planning. Uh, so uh, in my years as executive director at different organizations, I have managed, I would say, three major financial transitions. So from having, a financial manager to having a controller to working with a fractional team to having one team to work with another team. So all kinds of different directions. And in every single one, I have experienced that there is not nearly enough documentation, not nearly enough oversight to be able to smoothly manage that transition. It's always, in my experience so far, has always been pretty chaotic. Um, and when we think about as well, I'm not sure, again, the sizes of the organizations or even the roles of the folks who are in the room today. But I know often, again, going back to our board members, of course, we have volunteers. So we have volunteer finance committees and volunteer board members. And depending on the size of the organization, we will often see that perhaps a treasurer has quite a lot to do with the interpretation of finances and with making sure that they get from the staff to the committee to the board or whatever that flow looks like. This means that we have so much knowledge and responsibility resting on single individuals to do this job. It is so difficult to manage. And we're looking at sort of key operations sometimes. So whether or not it's reporting or the actual, the bookkeeping, accounts payable, payroll, these are not functions that we want ever to slip when we are transitioning to through staff or through board members or whatever. And so the importance of controls and financial policies helps us to download and centralize all of the data that we need to protect these core organizational functions through succession, through transitions. Um, the other thing as well that I would say, how it protects the organization. Again, when we look at, in my journey through learning about finance, I would say that at the beginning, I thought that like accounting, math, science, there is one way that it's done. Everybody does it the same way. Everybody speaks the same language. Everybody, not true. As it turns out, not true. And especially when you have, nonprofits with varying resources, folks who are not working with, a company like Enkel, for example, might be cobbling together skill sets across different individuals and making it work. This is seriously inhibits an organization's ability to diversify and to grow and to be responsive. When you're relying on what's in one person's head and they have, a sliver of knowledge matched with somebody else's sliver of knowledge, it just makes it very susceptible to change. And so I think this is another reason why financial controls and policies are important because it makes your organization much more resilient in the face of change from many different directions.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Great response. All right, let's talk about smart solutions being expertise, technology, and efficiency to really help you start to implement what we've talked about today. So I've mentioned it a few times, but cloud-based tools really enable visibility, speed, and governance at scale. So modern technology is the foundation that makes the three pillars possible. So let's talk about a few layers of this, but automated bookkeeping platforms, which I mentioned at the beginning. So cloud accounting systems like QuickBooks Online and Xero automate transaction recording, bank reconciliations, and financial statement generation. This ultimately frees staff up for manual data entry. So what happens in these cloud-based platforms is they're integrated in a secure way with your bank, pulling data in from your bank account throughout the month so that the organization can effectively start to do a lot of the reconciliation work before month end. Secondly, here is real-time dashboards. So customizable dashboards display key financial metrics at a glance. They enable boards and leadership to monitor organizational health without waiting for monthly reports. So you can start to build real-time dashboards, say around your donor management system or just your bank account to look at cash flow. You can really start to see the whole picture before the financials are even completed. And then third would be integrated systems. So seamlessly connecting different tools, your CRM, your payroll system with your accounting system, really eliminating the duplication of data entry and ensuring consistency across the organization. And of course, that makes the whole process quicker. So, technology is not a replacement for financial expertise. It's ultimately a tool that helps you amplify your team's capabilities and enable strategic finance at scale. All right, let's talk about expert financial leadership without the full-time overhead. So, one of the challenges, of course, is and Rebecca alluded to it in the previous response. A lot of organizations are, I think the words you used were cobbling together teams, right? The challenge with finance in a not-for-profit organization is it really demands a broad skill set, right? So the challenge is you might have a freelance controller, freelance bookkeeper, and you are the one bringing the teams together. At Enkel, we do all of this for you. So we can provide fractional controller services, which really is the oversight layer on financial statement preparation. We also provide the bookkeeping, payroll, accounts payable processing services. But what this will do is provide you with month-end close and financial reporting, budget development and monitoring, cash flow management, audit preparation and coordination, and team supervision and process improvement. Then we have the fractional CFO layer, which really looks more into the future. So long-term financial planning and forecasting, scenario modeling and risk analysis, capital planning and fundraising, or financial policy development. It may be the case that you just need the fractional controllership on an ongoing basis, and periodically you need a fractional controller for some special projects, let's say, to maybe improve your financial policies, as an example. So some of the advantages of this model are, of course, cost effective. You only pay for the hours you need. You typically will end up as an organization saving 30 to 50% over having a person on the payroll full time. The services are flexible. They scale up and they scale down as the organization's needs change. And it gives organizations of all sizes access to senior level expertise without a lengthy recruitment process and without cost. So organizations with budgets under 5 million typically benefit most from these fractional services. They help organizations gain executive level expertise without the full-time cost.
Can I just chime in on that really briefly?
Please, Rebecca.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I love the point that you said about such a broad skill set. So I have worked with I had an organization. We had a full-time controller. This controller was skilled enough that doing all of the bookkeeping is like this is not a good use of this person's time because their skill set is here. We're paying a lot to have someone who is overqualified doing bookkeeping. Conversely, I've worked with financial managers who did not have formal accounting background and were able to create reports and granting reports, funding reports, and things like that, but did not have the financial acumen to be able to interpret the statements to understand the business. And so in both of these situations, full-time permanent salaries, and you're only getting a slice of the expertise that you need. And so, in my experience, when we've worked with Enkel in the past, it's just such a relief to know, like you said, Omar, that you're paying what you need for the person with the right skill set at the right time in the ratio that you need it as an organization, and having it be able to also be responsive to the team that you have, even if it is cobbled together. People may be making important contributions, and to be able to have fractional solutions sort of map around what you want to keep and what you want to evolve, in my experience, has been so valuable so far.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right. So, really, at a high level, I'll cover this. Four phases to transform your finance function. If you're interested in having us take a look at your systems, your operations, and how our service might come together for you, really, there's the assessment phase. So, evaluating where you are today, looking at gaps, engaging different stakeholders. The next is planning. So selecting the technology, documenting the processes, creating those timelines, that detailed workflow process map project plan I was talking about earlier. Then comes implementation, getting the team, both sides, trained up on the specifics of your organization, establishing what the reporting tools are going to look like, migrating you to any new systems. And then finally is optimizing. We never stop refining, improving because there are always new tools. There's always new opportunities to improve the way that we are helping you manage your finance function. All right. We covered a lot. We have 10 minutes left. Let's dive into Q&A. So I will stop sharing my screen and we will jump to questions now. So I'm going to read these out here. Okay. How can nonprofit leaders balance the need for better financial systems with limited budgets and staff capacity? Rebecca, do you want to start? Maybe I can add.
Sure. Yeah. Um, it's an interesting question because it depends a little bit on your starting point, right? In my experience at the organizations that I've been at, which are sort of budgets of between 1 to 2 million, we had permanent staff who were managing finance, but not the full breadth of finance and not as effectively or efficiently or as timely a way as we wanted. And so switching to a fractional company was actually the cheaper solution, right? This was a much more cost-effective way to get the entire process looked after in a way that was going to grow with the organization. If your starting point is that you are not paying anybody right now for finance, or if it's sort of a little bit of the executive director and a little bit of a volunteer, a little bit of this and that, I would say even taking the ebook that they've linked here, a webinar like this, the case for support of why should this organization invest in finance couldn't be stronger. Like literally, are we going to exist in a year or not? We don't know. How do we figure that out? Finance, you know? So when it comes to resourcing, again, it sort of depends a little bit where you're starting from. I think as well, there are some different, whether it's grants for technology, whether it's grants for changing operating and business structures, whether it's another great one, as we know in certain different grants and funders, salaries can be a hard sell, but there's always a line for contractors, professionals, whatever you call it. I've had great experience in being able to piece off more so than your admin cost necessarily, being able to piece off, fractional contract finance into grants all over the place, more so than being able to cover, say, a financial manager salary. So I actually think that using contractors and fractional work gives you more versatility in terms of funding this work than does again hiring somebody.
I just want to add to that because I talk to a lot of clients as they're coming into Enkel, and what I see out there is wildly different. So there are organizations where we are a cost saving, right? If you did have a full-time person, we will, I'm almost certain, save you money. But there are organizations that pay somebody like $20 an hour. And often it's a case of that person had a relationship with the organization. They were in some way emotionally connected. So effectively like a quasi volunteer. And then, they look at what our fees are and they're higher. But I think you really have to evaluate the outcome, what you will be getting, and how the service can drive your organization forward and help you receive a lot of the benefits that we talked about today, as opposed to being in that reactive mode. So I see the situation where we're 100% more expensive or 100% cheaper than what the organization is spending. But I would encourage organizations and board members to really think about value. And also, when you're comparing different service providers, because this happens all the time, like who are you actually comparing? What I call bookkeeping and the outcome from my bookkeeping service may be different than somebody else. So, price and cost is a tricky one here. And then also, think about that cost of the executive director's time. If the executive director is actually doing the bank reconciliations, they could be redeploying that time towards higher value activities that, drive the impact forward, right?
And I think in terms of when we think about, because we think about financial resourcing and then human resources, people, hours, and time and energy. And the reality is that to make a transition like this, if it is, say, the executive director who is doing too much of the day to day or is bogged down by interpreting all of these things, it's taking time away from your ability to zoom out and have long horizons and think strategically. The reality is that a transition like this might require a short term, the short term, require more of your time to manage the transition, but in the long run, you're going to have so much more time back to do what you should be doing and have more skilled professionals taking out a piece of your role. So there are also phases to it as well.
Yes, absolutely. So there are actually a couple of other questions, but I think we've actually kind of wrapped in the answers to those questions. So I think we will stop there. Rebecca, again, thank you so much for joining us and for providing your insights. To our audience, thank you very much for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out to us. We will make our contact information available to you if we can help in any way. Thank you. Have a great day, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye.